The dust has settled on another WrestleMania, as Mania 41, the first of the Netflix era, is in the books. The two-night extravaganza showcased 14 matches, 8 of which had titles at stake. And as with just about any WrestleMania, it was a mixed bag as far as in-ring action and booking were concerned, and Night 1 and Night 2 certainly weren't equal when it came to match quality. So just who hits the jackpot and who rolled a 7 when WrestleMania visited Las Vegas? I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is every WrestleMania 41 match ranked from worst to best. Join us. Number 14, Cody Rhodes vs. John Cena for the WWE title. Heading into WrestleMania 41, Cody Rhodes vs. John Cena felt like it had every ingredient to be an epic main event for the ages. Two major stars in their first one-on-one meeting for close to a decade. John Cena wrestling as a heel for the first time in over 20 years and gunning for a record-breaking 17th world title. The strong possibility The Rock could show up and influence the outcome. But on the night it just didn't work and turned out to be one of the most disappointing WrestleMania matches ever. The action was pretty dull and predictable and never seemed to hit that higher gear before completely falling off a cliff with the ref bumps and appearance of Travis Scott. Cody thankfully got rid of him with a crossroads, but then showed himself to be the world's biggest sap on the Grande stage when he refused to hit Cena with the title belt, opening himself up to get blasted in the nuts and then hit with the belt to give Cena his 17th world title. A terrible ending to a pretty rotten match. This ended WrestleMania 41 on a dour note and begins Cena's reign with a whimper. Number 13, the War Raiders vs. the New Day for the World Tag Team titles. The War Raiders and the New Day are two very good tag teams capable of having good matches together. But as you can see by their positioning here, this wasn't one of them. Highlights of the 9-minute affair included Ivar hitting a terrifying moonsault and, well, Ivar hit a pretty terrifying moonsault, didn't he? The match started to fall apart as it ran out of steam towards the end before New Day hit their finish to kick off their umpteenth tag title reign. This certainly wasn't actively bad or anything, just utterly forgettable and a match that really could have benefited from having a stipulation attached to it. Number 12, Randy Orton vs. Joe Hendry. Randy Orton was supposed to wrestle Kevin Owens at WrestleMania 41, but KO withdrew while announcing that he was set to be out of action indefinitely due to a serious neck injury. The Viper instead issued an open challenge, which was answered on Night 2. Given what had gone down on SmackDown in the weeks and months beforehand, many expected Blue Brand General Manager Nick Aldis to step up and make his in-ring WWE debut, but it was TNA World Heavyweight Champion Joe Hendry who appeared instead. Somebody must have said his name, I guess. Right, obviously as a match, this was a whole bunch of nothing. 3 minutes of basic exchanges that ended when Orton hit the RKO as Hendry did his meme pose. But it was a great moment, especially for the local hero, who received a huge pop from the tens of thousands inside Allegiant Stadium and got to have a match at the granddaddy of them all for the first, but hopefully not last time in his career. Some will argue that the short match length and clean loss damaged Hendry and TNA, but trust me, they will be fine. TNA have survived a lot worse, and along with cockroaches and Keith Richards, will most likely be the last things left on this godforsaken planet. Number 11, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez vs. Lyra Valkyria and Becky Lynch for the women's tag team titles. The makeshift team of Bayley and Lyra Valkyria had won a gauntlet to earn a shot at the women's tag team champions Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez on Night 2, but Bayley was attacked on Night 1, giving Lyra 24 hours to find a replacement. The women's Intercontinental Champion turned to her pal Becky Lynch, marking the man's first WWE appearance since losing to Morgan in a cage match on Raw almost a year prior. Again, this was a match that was not so much about the match quality. I mean, it was a fine TV-style tag bout and all, but the moment of Becky's big return and title win as she hit the manhandle slam on Liv to bag the belts. Of course, this was all for naught as the Judgment Day members regained the titles the next night on Raw, after which Lynch turned heel on Valkyria, setting up a singles program. Number 10, Jade Cargill vs. Naomi. File this one under pleasant surprise, as you never really quite know what you're going to get with the talented but relatively inexperienced Jade Cargill. Luckily, she was in there with the experienced and underrated Naomi, who now working as a heel was in a position to really lead their match. They didn't faff about as Jade set up throwing her rival around before Naomi was able to turn things around with a draping X-Factor onto the floor. Inevitably, Cargill came back with a power-based offense, which included countering a diving second rope blockbuster Buster into a jackhammer. It was a little tentative in parts and didn't have a ton of heat, but they worked hard and got fans into it at the end, where the former AEW star hit an electric chair into a powerbomb followed by Jade to go 2-0 at WrestleMania. Number 9, AJ Styles vs Logan Paul. As annoying as it may be, the fact is Logan Paul is pretty darn good at this whole pro wrestling thing. He may only work a handful of times a year and his matches may be carefully produced ahead of time, but Logan usually delivers when it matters and seems to have natural instincts when he's in front of a crowd. Paired with a world-renowned veteran like AJ Styles at WrestleMania, the expectation was that Paul would add to his growing collection of very good matches. But the match was simply good, missing the very mark as rather curiously several of the phenomenal ones WrestleMania outings have. Logan is athletic and looked impressive on the offense, and while AJ might not be the superlative performer he once was, he's basically incapable of having a bad match, and they put together some cool sequences. It does say something when the appearance of the incredibly underrated Karrion Kross gets the biggest pop of the match, as Styles rejected his help and fell victim to the pulverizer to end what had been a decent, if not slightly too long, bout. Number 8, El Grande Americano vs Rey Fenix. Another match bitten by the injury bug, as El Grande Americano was meant to wrestle Rey Mysterio on night 1, but unfortunately the WWE Hall of Famer suffered an injury on SmackDown the night before, necessitating a replacement. Rey Fenix is as good a replacement as any, and he and Americano had a really fun little mid-card match filled with exciting high spots. But let's be honest, it just didn't feel like a WrestleMania match, did it? There was no big grudge to settle or title at stake, just the ongoing story of Americano disrespecting the culture and history of Lucha Libre. They stuffed a hell of a lot into the 8 minutes they had to play with, including Americano busting out a friggin' 450 moonsault, but it was just quite hard to care about it all, even if the effort and inventiveness was appreciated. The finish was good as El Grande loaded up his mask with a piece of metal and hit Fenix with a mid-air headbutt before putting the match to bed with a diving headbutt from the top rope. Number 7, Tiffany Stratton vs Charlotte Flair for the WWE Women's title. Had these two been on the same page, hell had they been reading the same book, this could have been one of the best matches of the weekend. But the bout had fallen apart long before Flair or Stratton made it to the ring due to a couple of segments in the build that went completely off the rails. Once they were standing opposite each other on the night, it was clear that they weren't necessarily about to have a classic. Unfortunately, the quality of the match just never got above decent, and it was evident from the off that there were communication issues resulting in some sloppiness and botched spots. One thing that made it interesting was the sense that the thing could just collapse at any minute, but they kept it together well enough and went through their routine, leading to the requisite finisher sequences that ended with Tiffany hitting the prettiest moonsault ever to retain her gold. That sound you hear is 60,000 people breathing a collective sigh of relief that Charlotte didn't go over, along with management watching from the gorilla position backstage, thanking the wrestling gods that it didn't deteriorate into a full-on shoot. Number 6, Gunther vs Jay Uso for the World Heavyweight title. One of the most surprising Royal Rumble winners ever, main event Jay Uso yeeted himself all the way to the opening match of night 1 of WrestleMania 41. Curtain jerking Jay Uso just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? To be fair, if you can't go on last, you might as well go on first, since the crowd are guaranteed to be hot for the opener. And with Jay as over as he is, the crowd was certainly into seeing him attempt to take down World Heavyweight Champion Gunther. The story was a simple one, with the no-frills champ using his strong style offense to subdue the spirited challenger who just kept coming back and refused to give up, the crowd yeeting him on in the face of the ring general's stiff chops and strikes. It picked up a little during the closing stretch, though it didn't come close to hitting the heights that Gunther's previous Mania outings with Sami Zayn and Sheamus and Drew McIntyre did. The result was a popular one in Sin City mind, as Jay hit a trio of top rope splashes before cinching in his own sleeper hold, forcing Gunther to tap out. Bloody hell. Number 5, Drew McIntyre vs Damian Priest. Drew McIntyre made no secret of the fact that he wasn't a happy camper going into his 10th WrestleMania. The Scottish Warrior felt like his incredible work in 2024, in particular his Slammy Award-winning feud with CM Punk, entitled him to a prime spot on the Mania card, ideally a title match. Instead, he was programmed with Damian Priest, the man who had cashed in on him to win the World Heavyweight title a year prior. Despite them having wrestled on multiple occasions in 2024, both men made the most of their situation and aided aided by their match being fought under Sin City street fight rules, had themselves a genuine banger. With plenty of plunder to play with, McIntyre and Priest beat the tar out of one another, slapping meat and breaking tables as they went. The violence escalated as the match wore on until Drew finally put Damian's head in front of a chair sandwiched between the middle and top turnbuckles and hit a gnarly claymore to pick up the dub. A great ending to a hard-hitting match. Number 4, LA Knight vs Jacob Fatu for the United States title. The weekend's United States title match pitted two people who were very fun to watch for very different reasons against one another. LA Knight is fun to watch because he's so over and people are well into his shtick, while Jacob Fatu is fun to watch because you never know what the super athletic super heavyweight is going to do, and he has an aura that could kill a man at any moment. Anyway, these two have good chemistry together and they worked their socks off here, building a match that wasn't always the prettiest but featured some very strong exchanges and believable near falls. The spot of the match had to be Knight countering Fatu's triple jump moonsault into a BFT. When that didn't get the job done, however, you got the sense that the result was inevitable. And so it was hardly a shocker when the Samoan werewolf regrouped, hit a second rope Samoan drop and two very graceful moonsaults to win his first singles title in WWE. Number 3, Bron Breakker vs Dominic Mysterio vs Finn Balor vs Penta for the Intercontinental title. One of the big complaints fans had heading into this year's WrestleMania was how many multi-person matches WWE had booked for it. There was merit to the complaints, as it felt as if WWE weren't necessarily making the best and most compelling matches they could in order to get more people on the card. However, when it came right down to it, the multi-person matches were really bloody good. On night 2, Bron Breakker defended his Intercontinental title against Balor, Penta and Dirty Dom in a four-way that featured non-stop action and gave everyone in it the chance to shine. Bron did his explosive power stuff and Penta did some good lucha things, while the other two did their stuff and gave things a little bit of extra storyline juice with their ongoing dissension. After a fast-moving back and forth 10 minutes, it was Mysterio who walked away with the belt, pinning his Judgment Day cohort after a frog splash. Fair play to WWE for reading the room and putting the belt on Dom, who was probably the most over wrestler of the entire weekend. Sure, a few eyebrows were raised at taking the belt off Breakker, but the big angle at the end of the post-WrestleMania Raw certainly explained WWE's logic. Number 2, CM Punk vs Roman Reigns vs Seth Rollins. One of CM Punk's big gripes and regrets after he walked out of WWE in 2014 is that he never got the opportunity to main event WrestleMania. Having cruelly had to sit out his first Mania back since his grand return due to a torn triceps, the straight-edge superstar finally got to headline the show of shows on night 1 of WrestleMania 41. Standing across from him were two men with plenty of experience closing the biggest show of the year, while at ringside Paul Heyman, accompanying Punk on the night, was sure to play a role in the proceedings. Expectations were high, but these three thrive on pressure, and I'm happy to report they knocked it out the park. For 30 pulsating minutes, they fought, brawled in the crowd, and traded big moves, keeping fans guessing as the match wore on, and it became increasingly hard to call who was going to get their hand raised at the end of it. As expected, Heyman played his part in determining that, first turning on Punk before doing the same to Reigns and allowing Rollins to curb stomp his way to victory. An anticipated twist perhaps, but predictable doesn't necessarily mean bad, and that doesn't take anything away from the bell-to-bell work Punk, Roman and Seth put in, making sure that an inconsistent night 1 ended on a high. Number 1, Io Sky vs Rhea Ripley vs Bianca Belair for the Women's World title. If the three men competing in Night 1's main event set the bar, then the three women competing in Night 2's opener arguably raised it that much higher. Another one that was criticised by some for being a triple threat, anyone irked at the booking wouldn't have cared one iota about a minute into this tremendous contest. Because this was fast and furious from the get-go, and they hardly took a breath for the 15 minutes they were out there, working at a feverish pace regardless of what combination of the three were in the ring at any given time. They were intense, they laid it in, and the crowd were with them every step of the way as they hit their signature stuff, but mixed in some counters and counters to counters in amongst some gnarly three-way offense like Rhea hitting Io with a razor's edge onto Bianca. Where the women's title match on night 1 suffered from poor communication, there was no such issue here. The triumvirate of Sky, Ripley, and Belair worked together to set the tone for night 2 and ended things right at the peak when the infectiously energetic Io broke up Bianca's post-KOD cover with a moonsault. Follow that, men.